Hi folks, good evening. I'm going through a set of workshops to make students familiar with MVC architecture. So what we are going to do is we're going to build a system. Say for instance, I'm talking about Spring MVC. So we're going to build, in fact, not one, but two systems. And these systems are going to help you achieve certain things. So we're going to have an application which we call it as the booking application. We'll also have another application hosted, and we're going to call this as admin application. Okay, so we're going to have an administrative user or functionality for certain kind of booking facilities. So what is the architecture that we want to use? We want to use one Spring Boot to be able to bind all the smaller frameworks together. We're going to use Spring Web. This is going to build MVC architecture for us. We're going to test some of the components that we are going to create. So we will be using Spring Test. We will stick to simple RDBMS design. So we're going to use Spring JPA for persistence. To keep things simple, we have the inbuilt H2 database that we are going to use. So this driver will be used, and of course for utility purposes we are going to use Lambo. And for the front part of it, we need a template engine, which is the views. Okay? So for this views, we are going to use the time lift that comes inbuilt in Spring Web. So these are the different kind of framework libraries that we will be using. The programming language that we are going to use is Java, and the build tool that we are going to use is Maven. And we want to go about building a very simple application to demonstrate how MVC works. To give you a context, we need a case study. So I'm going to take some time to explain the case study for you. So if you look at the case study, we are looking at condominiums. In Singapore, we call this as condominiums. In other countries, sometimes I do understand that you call that as gated community. Whatever is your way or nomenclature, it's a living space for many families who come in and then, of course, share many activities. So here, the condominium is going to have a club, and there are members in the club. For example, Amy, Bob, and Charlie. I didn't want to call it as ABC as a typical developer, so I'm just using some random names. Are members of this community. They are entitled to use the facilities that the condominium offers. So what are the kind of facilities that you could expect? Of course, it could be an event room, which is for indoor functions. It could be a swimming pool. It could be a gym. It could be a garden booking outside for an outdoor function. It could be a barbecue pit. There are many facilities that the condominium has got in itself. And the members of this condominium community are allowed to book these facilities for their use. Of course, you need somebody to moderate all these things. So we have a super user kind of thing who is the administrator. So let's call this person as Dave, and Dave is going to set up all these things and let the application do the rest of the job. So the application that the normal members will use is what I've called it as a booking application. And the administrator's super user rights and setup application is what we call it as the admin booking module. So now that you understand the premise of this case study, we're going to look into what kind of entities that this application has to deal with. Number one, it has to deal with the facility. Of course, example is the gym and the pool and so on and so forth. Second is the users who are of type members like Bob, Amy, Charlie. The third is the actual booking that they do. So these are the three main entities that this application is going to deal with. Now this is fine. Let's see what's the tech stack that we want to discuss in this particular project. So we're going to use an IDE, which is the Spring Tool Suite, because it's easy for us to bring about all the libraries that we spoke about here, which is the boot, web, test, JPA, H2, Lambo, and template, very easily into the Eclipse work environment using the Spring Tool Suite IDE. So we can download a copy of this from spring.io.tools. We could use the Lambo utility for simplifying our modeling classes, and we will use Java Development Kit. An alternate to Java Development Kit is OpenJDK. I leave it for the users to look at alternatives. I'm using a Windows platform. Of course, you've got to pick the one that is suitable for yours, which if it is different from mine, like for example, Mac or Linux. At the later stage, we'll also see how to pack this into a container or a local server and do a deployment. So having spoken about this, the Spring Web Tool Suite website is spring.io/tools. I'm going to pick the Windows x64 and have a downloaded copy. I'm going into the Java downloads. There are many long-term support versions as mentioned. So there is this 8 and 11, which is a little old but stable LTS versions. For this particular set of videos, I'm going to use 17. So I went into the 17 installer and then downloaded it. The last part is the Lumbo project. So I go into the projectlumbo.org/download and I get the latest copy of it is 1.18.24. So I have put all of them in a particular folder and we are going to work with that particular folder to see how to create all the software from scratch. So in my case, if you look at the folder at which I have saved all the files, I call this as E drive, a simple MVC demo. I got the 3 jar files that I need: executable jar file, JDK of course, Lumbo, Spring Tool Suite. So these are the 3 main software that I need. But before going into the JDK installation, I want to remove any existing JDK that is there. So I'm going to use the app wizard to start to understand what kind of software is already installed. When I go in, you can see that I have already installed JDK 11. I'm going to uninstall that so that I have a cleaner version to work with. So I'm only going to use JDK 17. So I rather only leave that inside the programs and features that are currently involved. For this reason, I'm going to remove the JDK before I proceed with installation. Of course, the IDE, which is the Spring Tool Suite, doesn't have any prerequisite. You can have any number of versions of it. Of course, you can see that I also have other versions of STS, but it won't bother the basic installation. So I have to give it some time for removing the older version. Then I can be very sure that there is no other JDK inside my ecosystem. I can even verify after the uninstallation is over. I can verify if there is any other Java officially present by opening a PowerShell in the administrative rights. Okay, so when it starts up, I'm going to look for existing Java version. I'll say Java -version to see if there are any existing versions. So it is not recognized, as you can see. So very clearly, I don't have a JDK existing in my environment. So that's good enough. So let's get started with the installation process. So the first part is to install the JDK. So I'm going to double click on the JDK self-extracting file. So this will start the installer wizard after granting permission. So the wizard is roughly going to look like the page that is going to come on the screen in a minute. And the JDK installation is not very difficult, so I'm going to go and select the defaults. I'm not going to do any additional special setup. The version that I'm installing is 17.05. I'm quite happy with that, so I select that. The default location where it puts all my JDK installation is C program files Java JDK 17.05. I'm fine. I'm not going to change the default setup. So then you can see that it goes ahead and installs all the developer kit components. The technical difference between JRE and JDK is there are a lot of additional runtime tools that are available in JDK, which is not present in the plain VM, which is JRE. As a developer, I would like to profile my application. I like to do any kind of performance tuning at a later stage. So JDK is sort of more sought than a very simple JRE. So that's the reason I picked JDK over that of JRE. And the installation is successful. If I want, I can proceed to look at all the official documentation and other things that I need. Maybe I can bookmark this site, but other than that, I'm technically done with installation. So I just close the installer. The next installer that I have to start up is the SDK. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to install this inside my simple demo here. It's a self-extracting exe. So I'm going to use, I'm just going to double click it. As long as there is a Java version that is working, the extraction should not be a trouble. So it takes a minute or two for the self-extracting exe to start working. And the moment you can see that it works, it shows a sort of unzip progress taskbar. Something like this will be seen on your screen. And it is basically trying to melt all the zipped archives into the relevant folders, so that the whole Eclipse IDE becomes very usable. Okay. So as usual, I am also installing that on the same folder, which is E drive as simple MVC demo. And you can see on the progress that it is creating a folder called STS 4.16.1 release. So this is the version that I'm using as of November 2022. Give it a minute or two, depending on your processor speed, it should be able to unzip these things. You can see mine is quite fast, so you can see that it sort of only took less than a minute to completely unzip the self-extracting exe. Once it is done, you can open the folder to see if the execution files are around. If you see a successful green icon, it basically means you have completed the STS installation. I right click this and then say create a shortcut, and I can give a name for this. So I'm going to call this as rename. I'm going to call this as MVC demo. So I'm going to push this into the desktop so that I can start from the desktop whenever it is needed. So I'm going to say send the shortcut to desktop. So the next time you look into your empty desktop, you'll be able to see the MVC demo. Okay. So that's pretty much what I wanted to show in this particular installation folder. So if you start this, it basically works and asks you for a workspace and you can proceed. But we have not completed the third part of installation, which is the Lumbo, which is what I'm going to do next. So I go back into the same Spring MVC demo folder. I have the Lumbo self-extracting exe. I'm going to select that. Immediately it opens up the installer. Normally it goes and scans for any existing Eclipse installations on the C drive, but because I have installed the STS in a E drive, it's not necessary to be able to find. So I'm going to say specify location, and in this location I'm going to select the E drive. I'm going to select the simple MVC demo, and I'm going to pick the 4.16.1 release. So immediately you can see that it is being located. Now I want the Lumbo file to be installed in this existing IDE location. So I'm going to say install and update. So immediately it asks for a successful installation and it says quit installer. Okay. So that's one additional step that I have to do for Lumbo to work. If it doesn't work, you can still go ahead and create getter setters to be able to work with your workspace. So I want to create my project in this particular folder. So I'm going to create a new subfolder called workspace, and this is exactly where I want my Eclipse to start. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remember this workspace as the starting folder. I'll copy this path so that I will be able to start the installer in the same location. Okay. So I'm going to start my Eclipse IDE, which I've just now called it as MVC demo, and then it basically starts up the IDE in the same folder. So I'm going to put the path name as MVC demo workspace, and I launch it. So this is the default workspace that I get. As you know that I would like to start to have two new projects. One is the booking and the other one is the admin, booking admin. So these are the two projects that I want to start. So I'm going to go ahead and say file, create new. So I'm going to say new Spring starter project. Okay. So I'm going to call this as booking because that's the main application I want to create. And of course I can set up the project folders here. So I'm going to just use com.example, no problem, and I'm going to call the application as booking. So I'm going to call the package also as booking. Okay, so com.example.booking. Now when it comes to the projects, if you remember the list that we discussed, we had a few frameworks that we needed, like Spring Boot, MVC, Test. Spring Boot is default, so you don't have to add it, but you have to add the other 6 list of items that you wanted to add here. And in case you want to manage sessions, it's good to add the session object as well, in case you want to manage the web session part of it. And is there anything else that you need? I think this is pretty much good for starters, so we will just live with this. Okay. Is there any other additional libraries needed? Maybe we will add it up later. So we have the 7 items to add: Spring Web, Spring Test, JPA. So let's see how to add that. So you got to start looking for these libraries here. So I'm going to say web, and the moment I say web, you can see that it filters. I'm going to select the Spring Web. Then of course I want the JPA, so I'm going to type in JPA. So it gets me the Spring JPA. I need my driver for H2. So the moment I type H2, it gets me the H2 database driver. Then of course test is automatically included, okay? And of course I need time leaf, so I'm going to look for time and it gets me there. And of course I'm going to look for Lambo, so I'm going to type Lambo, it gets me there, okay? And of course I was talking about session, okay? So I'm going to add a Spirng session. Of course if you want validator, you can also look for validate, okay? So it can also get you the bean validation from the Hibernate validate, okay? So you have 6 plus 1 7, and Spring Boot and test is automatically added, so you don't have to do anything additional about it, okay? So all the 7 libraries are inside. I'm going to move on. You can see that there are many versions, but it automatically picks only the stable release. In this case it's 2.7.5. I'm quite happy with that, and I'm going to say finish. So this will complete my booking application. So it takes a minute or two for the workspace to be set up, and once it is set up, I'm ready for doing or coding the project. So this is the initial project workspace setup instruction. Now the next part is to start discussing user stories. Maybe I want to look into additional use cases later, but I will start with simple user stories, maybe a little bit of acceptance criteria for each of this. And once I'm done with that, maybe I can do some low fidelity wireframes as well, okay? So I have to focus on the booking application, how the application has to look for members, what are the things that I like to have, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to go back to my drawing board here. So this time I want to talk about the use case stories. So let me make sure that I get the Scrum board inside. Okay, so I look for the Scrum board. Okay, so let me just add that. Okay, so all the Scrum tools are inside. So I'm going to start creating a very simple Scrum utility. Okay, so this is basically what I have on the Scrum board. So this is the web page that I want to design. Okay, so that's fine, and it's the view web page table. I'll come to all the wireframes a little later. I'm not dealing with any bugs, and it's a new sort of backlog or sprint board that I'm going to use. So let me start with the user map first, okay? So let's say that I want to have a very simplified architecture for starters. I'm going to map the user's journey, okay? So that's the feature map that I want to create first. So let me create the process, okay? So I'm going to talk about the member feature mapping. Okay, so I want to see what are the functionalities that I need. So I'm going to start with very simple ones. For starters, what I expect to have in my member story is something quite decent for me to sort of maybe look at. Okay, so let's say that I want to start with very simple feature, which is the login screen. Maybe I should avoid, let's say, no fill. That's easier to read. Okay, so we have a login screen. Somebody wants to log in. Once they are logging in, and they are allowed to view existing booking, okay, so they can view existing bookings. So there's some sort of logic that we're going to use to design that. Then of course you can see we can create a booking. Okay. And then of course once I create a booking, I should be allowing the same user to be able to edit the booking if necessary. Okay. And then of course maybe I will just use this a bit left. Okay. And once we allow for this, it's also possible for me to it's only edit, it's not edited, and I'll be able to delete the booking if necessary. Okay, so this is another feature that I'll be looking for in my system, and that's pretty much it. Okay, so because I am able to do a login, I must always be able to do a logout as well. So these are the very key activities that I probably look for in a very basic system. I'm not looking at many sophisticated use cases at this point on time, so I gotta have a login, logout as well. Okay, so these are the functionalities that I expect. And of course, you can pack this into multiple releases. Okay, so there can be first release and second release, assuming that we are doing 2 iterations. In the first release, what I want to do is a user story. So I will have a user story that says, as a member, I want to log into the booking application. Okay, so that's something that I would like to do. And of course, this is a user story that I like to complete. Okay. And of course, you can write testing criteria for the same. You can put in some testing criteria in this case. So you can see that when it is successful login, when it is not. So you can say acceptance test criteria is successful login, which is the view which gets success view. Otherwise failure, and what kind of different failures and how to handle it. Okay? Handling the errors. This is what I'm interested in, and this is the main login use case I want to do. And then of course I can also implement a view in the first release, so I'm going to take that user story as well into the first release. So as a member, I want to look at current month booking for a selected facility. So this is what I want to do first. So acceptance criteria is a successful view of what I have asked, and failure is handling exceptional situations. Okay, so how do I handle exceptional situations? So I may have to write some interesting user stories that will have month's booking, okay, for a selected facility. So I want to select a facility and then look at all the current month booking for it. Okay, so that's exactly my second use case that I want. Now once I've done that, and at the first release state level, maybe I also want to be able to log out of the system. So I'm going to say, as a member, I want to log out of the booking application. Success homepage. So you have a homepage, it comes back to it. Okay? And how do I handle exceptional situations? In case it's a failure that I can't log in or something, what is the expected system reaction? So these are the very 3 simple use cases I want to take up for release 1. Okay, so this I'm going to call this as release 1. The next thing is I'm going to start creating another set of use case, and this is for current booking. So I'm going to take this as a second round. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, as a member, I want to make a booking for a selected facility provided there is no other booking during the entire period. Okay. So I want to look at booking of the facility for the entire period. I shouldn't allow anyone else to look into any other bookings that is possible. So this is one condition. Okay. So if it's successful, I have to give a booking ID and a message is given. Okay. So if it's successful is how I try to react, and if it is a failure, I got to explain the reason why the booking failed, of failure. Okay. So this is something that I got to handle in the release too. Okay. And of course I have to look into all the business rules for implementation. So I have to additionally check all the BIS rules for booking, and I also have to write time slots for booking. Okay. So what is the default time slots and how many slots per day. Okay. All these things had to be decided as well. So this I'm going to call this as release 2. So these are the simple kind of user stories that I'm going to do. So login is basically mapped by this particular use case. Probably I should change my color back to the original. And then view existing booking is considered by this use case. And then log out is basically done by this particular use case. So this is how I've sort of designed it. Maybe I move this a bit easy to map. Then maybe I can take the release one elsewhere. Okay, so this is how I'm looking at implementing it. And when it comes to create a booking, edit a booking and delete a booking, of course all three are to be done in a very similar fashion, but you can see there's a lot of complexity in doing it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a booking. Okay. Then of course edit a booking is also going to take the same set of user stories. Okay. So I will try to create a second user story for edit. I'll also create another user story for delete. Okay. So these are the three things that I want to try during the release 2. So I want to be able to make a booking, then I want to edit the booking or delete a booking. So all the different use cases that come out of the same scenario, and of course the different possibilities inside my rule engine and so on and so forth. So this is how I basically have created the booking application. So these are the key use cases. Now if you want to visualize how you want to design your web page, so let's say that this is your default web page. I'm calling this as home page. Okay. So of course you can see that I can put in some icons here for the home page. I can say this is your information, so there's some data around here, so there's some sort of articles, some web articles inside. Okay. So there's some kind of content that's being displayed here and there, and of course I'm going to have one button which I'm going to call this as login button. So I'm going to say so this button is so there's a home page which basically comes to this home page, and then there is this login button which basically comes in when I want to log into a page. Now assuming that I want to design the login page just like I designed my home page, I'm going to create a login page this time. So I'm going to call this as login web page. Of course what I expect here is a very simple text bar. Okay, so I'm going to say I want to put text inside so that I'll be able to work with the data that I've submitted. Right? So what I need is a very clear text button. So I may have some information about the page, that's fine, I'll put some content inside, but the main part of the page is basically the text bar that I want to design. So let me go and pick this text box. Okay. So this is the input field that I want. So maybe I don't need this label. I'm going to say what's the username like, okay, and maybe I want a bigger font for this, and then of course input font field, and then of course I have to have the error message displayed in case something goes wrong. The other one that I'm looking for is password for entry. So of course again this also I want the fonts to be bigger so that it's visible. So this is again a input field, but this time it's not a text field, it's a password field. And of course there's an error message. Okay, so I don't need the third label. I guess I would rather need a submit button. So I'm going to use the username, password. I'm going to create a button that says login. So this is going to be my login screen. Okay. So once I log in, login web page, and this, maybe I should push this a little down, and then of course you can see that I have all the subtitle and text that's happening. I put all the static content here, I'll put all the dynamic content a little lower, but it's visible on my main page. So this is my login page. So this is the home page. Once you click on the login, it gets me to the login page. Now what happens when the login is successful? It gets me into the application. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another replica of this login page. I'm going to call this as welcome page. So okay, so I'm going to call this as booking welcome page. So you are allowed inside the application you're going to see is your booking. So what you expect to see inside is basically a menu. Okay, so there's going to be a button that is going to say view past facility booking, right? So I'm going to call this as facility booking. So I'm going to show a calendar kind of page, not necessarily very sophisticated, but a page that sort of tells me that I'm able to do the booking. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to achieve here. So I'm going to say view facility booking. That's the first one. Then what I can do is I can have another button that basically calls this as my booking. So this shows only my relevant bookings. View my only your facility booking. Okay? And then this is to extend it, create. Okay. So I'm going to put the create, view and edit and all. Manage my booking. So this is all the current bookings that I've done so far. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this a little bit. Okay. So that I have space for my additional functionality that I'm planning. So this is manage my booking. Once this is done, of course I have another one. I'm going to make it a bit small. Log out. I'll call it as medium size, and I'll make the text more sizable to hold just the logout, so that it's treated as one entity here. Here I can resize my button a bit because this is too big, not needed. I'm going to put this here. So these are the facilities that I expect. Okay? So here what I get to see is in default is the view my booking facility. So this is going to be table of booking. Okay, so I'm going to have my bookings, and then this is the view. Okay, so you have the facility and booking dates or something, and slots, and then of course I don't plan any actions, but this is the default. Okay, so I may not need actions here. We can remove the action symbols. It's just a set of inert table booking, and that's going to be my individual view for this my bookings. So this is basically I'm assuming that view my facility is being clicked. This is how it works. Okay. So when I use the same facility but I use manage my booking, what happens is a little different. This is where I have actions like edit and delete. So this time I'm looking at manage my booking view. So when somebody clicks on the manage my booking view, I'm going to have some key actions for each of my booking. So that is when I'll find this table useful. Okay. So this will be manage booking. So these are the very different bookings that I have in my system. And of course you can see that I can have actions like, since it's already credited, I can edit this, I can view the details if I need to, and I can also delete it if needed. Okay. So these are the different actions I'm looking at the manage. Okay. So this is not the welcome page, this is the manage booking page I have designed. Okay. And then of course you can see that there is another view which is the facility booking. Okay, so that's going to be a bit different from the default view booking. So So this time it's not manage booking, it's list booking for a facility. So you select the facility, and then of course depending on what you've selected, you're going to see the views that is related to it. So what happens here is you basically have the view facility. So the moment you click there, you're being asked to have a selection. Here it's a combo box. It's basically going to talk about all the facilities inside. Okay? Then of course you're going to say view button here, and this button is going to, the moment you select the facility and then you click on the view button, it's going to work out. So from the facility selection you go to the view, and when the view button is clicked, you're going to show a list of facilities that's being booked by even other members. Okay? So that's the difference. Okay? So that's pretty much it. And of course you're going to have to come back to this login page when somebody clicks logout. Okay? So when you click logout, you can see that the case is simple. It goes back to the same. When somebody clicks on logout, what happens is it basically goes into the login page. Okay? So once you click logout, the session is invalidated and you go into the login web page. That's how we envision this simple system. So how many screens you expect to have? You may have a home page, number 1, login, number 2, booking, listing, 3, manage booking, 4, list booking for a facility, 5, and logout is going to go back to the same login page. So you basically have 5 views, and I've basically created a very low fidelity prototype for each of these pages. So I hope this gives you a view on what we are trying to build, and that sort of completes my first setup. So that sort of completes all the user stories that we have taken in the match. Login, logout, viewing existing booking for a selected facility, creating, editing, managing a booking, viewing my bookings, which was not originally envisioned, but we have sort of added it into the wireframe because we find it useful. A home page, a login page, a logout page, booking facility, managing booking, and list for booking for a particular facility. So this is to view if the facility is free before going ahead and booking that. So these are the simple things that we want to implement, and this is how the entire workspace looks like. Once the project is set up, you can see that there is a source code by this package name called com-example.booking. We have the resources, which is the application.properties, which is currently empty. I have not put in any additional YAML properties here, and you can see that there is this templates folder for putting in any kind of template that I'm going to create. And of course, you see that this project has been created in Grader, which is not right. I should have selected Maven. So let me delete this and redo it so that you have a Maven project. So I'm going to delete the project content as well. So I'm going to go and create the starter project again. Yes, I'm going to stick to the same name, booking, because I don't expect any changes. So this is fine. And only mistake that I did in this is I chose Grader, so I'm going to choose Maven instead. I just want to use a simple tool. In fact, Grader is also useful, but many of you would have been very familiar with Maven, so that's why I'm sticking to Maven as the build tool. So we decided Maven, I'm sticking to Maven. So I'm going to go and select the same 7 items, which is H2 database, Lombok, JPA for the data part, session and validation for the form, and web for the MVC, timely for the template. The Spring Boot framework and test framework are all already added by default, so I'm quite happy with this selection. I'm going to say finish, so it recreates the project structure. But this time what happens is instead of the Grader file, you will find a file called pom.xml. That's the only difference here. And as usual, Maven tool does an incredible job of bringing all the libraries that are necessary for the frameworks that we have selected. This includes the MVC we are talking about, the Lumbo project, the H2 database, the JPA access, and all the related items. So if you scroll through the structure, you'll have the very same structure for the packages. This is for the resources. And if you look at the pom.xml, you can see that it basically has pulled in all the libraries that are necessary. Okay. So this is sufficient for us to get started, and that completes my first set of video that introduces this case study. From The next video, we'll start implementing the model classes, then we will implement the JPAs. We'll write some queries to see how the queries function. We'll do the testing of the database. And once the data layer is over, we proceed to implement the controller components and the services components. Finally, we will add all the 5 or 6 views that we have envisioned via the wireframes, and that should complete our very simple case study. Okay? So this is exactly what I wanted to demonstrate on the first session. Thank you very much for being with me. And when I start the next video, I'll probably improve the resolution so that you'll be able to see the screen and read the fonts much better. Thank you for putting up with this demo. And let's move on to the next part of this soon.